Ha! It worked.
Hey, Robin, how's it going, man?
Hey, it's going very well, Sean. Thanks. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me on.
thank you very much for joining us. Whereabouts in the world are you?
I am in Virginia in the United States, so about an hour and a half south of Washington, D.C.
So, is that the center of politics and intelligence?
Yeah, probably. Although I don't pay attention anymore. It's just too angry.
What got you interested in that profession? Could you just tell the viewers a little bit about you first?
Yeah, sure. So I went to our United States Naval Academy. I graduated from there in 1992, went into the United States Marine Corps as a Marine Corps officer for about 5 years, and I joined the FBI in 1997. And I became a special agent, and I was a counterintelligence agent. So my job for my 22 years before I retired from that was recruiting spies. And I started in New York City to Virginia. I went into headquarters, and during that time, I got on our counterintelligence behavioral analysis program. So our job was kind of the behavioral side of the profilers, and we strategized recruitment operations, double agent operations, false flags, espionage stuff. And then I took over our team a number of years before I retired and ran it before I retired. So that's my background. How I got into it, I failed at everything else I wanted to do in life, and I kind of wound up doing this.
So, we're going to get into your heavy duty line of work in a minute, but I've got a question that's just come to the tip of my tongue and must come out. I've always wanted to ask someone who worked for the FBI, what do you think of Clarice Starling and Silence of the Lambs?
You know, before I came to the FBI, that was a great show to watch. I thought you could go to the FBI Academy and they'd pull you right out because you're so awesome. They put you right on a great case. No. So it was really funny when I was going through the FBI Academy for my first training. That's when X-Files was still on TV. And so every Friday night we watched X-Files together saying, hey, we want to do that. That looks fun.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So the spy community, then we had Bustamante on here recently, and he was telling us about the risks and how you got to be trained in case you get snatched and interrogated. Did you have to get trained in that?
So I was on the other side, I was trying to catch the spies. And so my training was to identify and try to co-opt, recruit / sell them my product of American patriotism. So my job was really to try to strategize which one of these, and I worked against Russia most of my career, which one of these Russian intelligence officers might be so inclined to want to have a cooperation with me. And so, I didn't do any snatching. Now we did do some interdictions where, the intelligence officers were doing things they really shouldn't be doing. And so we'd try to grab them and let them know, hey, we're going to let your ambassador know that you're going home tomorrow. And so that's what we did. Then you get the little tit for tats going back and forth, or we expel people, they expel people. But by and large, our job is really to identify them and create relationships with them to see if they want to cooperate.
And did you have to travel overseas to do that, to Russia?
No. I would. There's a few places in the world I definitely wouldn't go because of my background. Russia is one of them. Although it's really funny, my books are being sold in Russia, and it's the other places in China. I wouldn't go there either because I worked against them. So, but no, I did not have to travel overseas. Although I did do a lot of traveling with the FBI because we did have a number of folks. Defector sources that we would share with our partners and alliances around the world. Matter of fact, I worked very closely with the Brits. MI5 and 6 were fantastic to work with. Great folks. We always said we had an expression, love the Queen. Queen had lots more money than we did.
So did you have to learn foreign languages to do this?
No, I didn't. Because again, when you're domestic service, you don't have to learn that. It helps if you do. So I kind of taught myself a little bit of Cyrillic. So I could read it, and so I could read business cards, and I could pronounce names, and I could read vodka bottles and things like that. But that's about it.
So how did you recruit people then?
It's actually pretty simple. For anyone that does any kind of sales work, and really life is about sales because you're always creating relationships and selling either yourself or a product or a service. I call it the toughest sales job because my service I was selling was patriotism to the United States. And the challenge with that is out of my limited potential client pool, which was about 35 intelligence officers, for the GRU, Russian Military Intelligence in New York, I have a limited potential client pool. I'm selling a service that they probably don't want to buy. And it was actually illegal for me to initiate contact with them as FBI because of treaties that we have. And so I couldn't even cold call. And so it really came down to having a circle of people around them that I was chatting with to find out about them, like we do now with social media. Before we do a cold call, before we even meet anyone, we'd want to try to find out what are this person's priorities, because a guarantee of human behavior is that everyone will act in their own best interest in terms of their safety, security, and prosperity for themselves and those they care about from their point of view. So my job is really simple. My job is to figure out which one of these individuals might have priorities that either a dying wish of a mother, a father, a grandmother, a grandfather was that their children wouldn't grow up under Putin's regime. And so that's a priority that I might be able to have a resource for. And then reciprocity, I'd ask them, hey, here's my priority to protect my national security. Are you willing to share what you have to help me protect my national security? So it's really identifying each other's priorities and having a discussion whether you're willing to share resources in terms of those priorities. So it's exactly like high-end sales. Finance industry is very similar to that, because people are literally putting their lives in your hands, and hopefully you don't get them killed or fired if it's on the finance side. So it really comes down to, you'd think it's the world of subterfuge and manipulation, but it's really not. It is actually complete, utter trust. So all I ever did was strategize trust.
So to guarantee the safety of them and their families then, did that require a complete defection at some point? Or did you have that person operating in the field, going about their normal business as much as possible so that they could keep providing you the information from the inside?
Yes, both. So, everything really, like everything in life, it comes down to the individual. You love to keep people in place as long as possible because it gives them direct access to all the information and intelligence you're looking for. But at the same time, the last thing you're going to do as an as the handling agent or as an organization, with the FBI behind you, is you're not going to put someone at risk. Believe it or not, you do your best to mitigate the risk and threat to them and their families as much as possible. So if things look like they were going sideways in any way, we'd try to pull them out. And at the same time, a lot of them didn't, the number of times you actually recruit a spy in your career, if you get one that you're even part of, that's a great, massive career that you had, because it's that rare that you win. It's like hitting lottery or, Mega Millions here. But you go through extreme lengths to protect them and their families. Because again, if you're not demonstrating that, you're not going to have trust. And so that's what you're doing.
So what was the craziest or most dangerous situation that arose from your line of work with the people that you were recruiting?
Boy, that's a really good question. I've never been asked that one before. Probably the most consequential, I'd say, that was potentially dangerous and kind of complicated was right after the spy, Robert Hansen. He was an FBI agent that, worked for the Russians, unbeknownst to us, obviously. He gave up a number of names of individuals that were cooperating with us, intelligence officers. And one of the individuals that had been cooperating with us, went back home and was living his regular life after he had done a cooperation. Well, his name was on the list that Hansen gave over to the Russians. And so he literally fled on his own to come here and try to, get in touch with us. Literally looked up my one of my colleagues' names in a phone book to call him on the phone on an expired visa saying help. And so that was a interesting situation to deal with. It worked out really well in the end for him and his family, but it was a stressful time. One, making sure he was safe and secure, and the other time, and the rest of it was dealing with multiple agencies that don't talk well together to resettle someone in the United States is a challenge.
Right. Wow. I can imagine, because I thought the CIA dominated this field. So did you bump heads with the CIA?
No, matter of fact, one of my best friends, I just saw him last week as a CIA case officer, retired. He was a station chief, and we worked together in New York. He was operations chief in New York when I was there. So upper echelons might, but it really comes down to everything in life is about building relationships. I worked very closely with the CIA even before 9/11 happened. I was in New York during 9/11. And because it comes down to demonstrating value and willing to affiliate with others, because human beings, besides acting in our own best interest, we want to feel valued by others. And how do you do that? How do you make a conversation about them? It's really simple. You seek their thoughts and opinions instead of sharing yours. You talk in terms of their priorities instead of sharing your own. You validate them non-judgmentally. In other words, you are non-judgmentally curious about them as human beings. And finally, you empower them with choices. And so when you build one of those four things in everything you say and everything you write, the entire shift goes from you to them, and their brain, they're starting to reward them for engagement. So the oxytocin and endorphins in the short term are going, but you're literally trying to get the serotonin and oxytocin going for the long term. So that's what you're doing to create those relationships. And we did that with each other, with the CIA, MI5, MI6, all the Five Eyes, as we call them. And then ultimately, when you're trying to recruit a spy, you're trying to do exactly the same thing with them. You're trying to make them feeling better and safe for having met you.
So are you trying to turn people in various lines of work in Russia to become spies? Are you trying to hire spies to become double agents?
So it's interesting phraseology is trying to turn people. No, because what you do is because you can't turn anyone. I mean, literally, so your job is to identify who might be inclined to want to do something like this, and then make them feel safe and secure and trust you to do it with you. So it's really not a turn, it's identify who might be willing to. So and then how we work with the CIA. So we don't do overseas operations. We have legats overseas that support law enforcement operations overseas. But it's the CIA is completely the overseas component of that. We're the domestic component here, statewide. And we do cooperate, with the CIA locally, and when operations overlap or people you want to talk to overlap. But so yeah, we're always trying to see who might be willing to help the cause, because there's literally not many of us and lots more of them.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to get an idea of is like what kind of profession these people are in. So in my mind, I've got, for example, like a nuclear physicist from Russia is over in the US at some conference. But perhaps he's got like some kind of escort from, Russian intelligence with him, and you guys have got to figure out how to like reach out to him and bypass the security he's got around him. Could you give us an example like of what you do?
That is a great example. Yeah, we love those guys when they come over like that. And you're right. So a lot of times again, it's been a couple years since I retired. They generally don't have escorts while they're here. Although when they're at conferences, they're surrounded by people that are intelligence officers, because Russia has a boatload of them. So, but if you're trying to be discreet, it's really the individual. You try to find out itineraries. You try to find intermediaries that'll do introductions to you. We put people in conferences like everyone else does that are there on our behest to kind of spot, maybe sidle up next to someone, grab a business card, hand a business card. But we can also do things where some people are coming off of planes and we try to pull them into secondary before they actually get through immigration. Pass them a card, say, hey, we know you're here. Love to have a conversation with you. If you might be willing to seek your thoughts and opinions, reach out to me if you have a chance. Again, you're seeking thoughts and opinions, talking about priorities, validating them, offering them options. That is the way you do it, because that's how you create a personal brand and a organizational brand where people want to come to you if you treat them that way, as opposed to, I've never heard of anyone volunteering to the FSB on the Russian side, because they use a lot of manipulation, a lot of coercion, a lot of strong arming and blackmailing to try to get people to cooperate. That's why no one volunteers, so we use a completely different approach to build those relationships. But yeah, we use all the methods we can to try to get next to someone we think is of value like that.
So it sounds like it's a bit of a numbers game as well. So if you approach like dozens of people with what you just described, what percent of those people, from your experience, would accept your offer?
So we got to categorize them. So a national intelligence officer, 90% of the time, they're 95 to 98% of the time, they're under diplomatic cover. So they're diplomats. So those entities, that is extremely low percentage. Like I said, if an agent has one that they've been involved in their career, that's a big win. My Jedi Master, when I was in New York, he actually he did 14. He was involved in 14 in a 21-year career. That was remarkable. He's one of the most impactful individuals I've ever known at national security at that level. But now when you're talking about individuals that are helping us, in these operations, that's a pretty high percentage, believe it or not. So I can't really remember very often when I asked, for someone's help and assistance in any sorts of, counterintelligence, things that I was doing, that said, no, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. Now, a lot of times it's like, Robin, I'm not comfortable doing this, but I'd be willing to maybe do this. So a lot of times they would help you zero in on things they might be willing to do. But you don't, I mean, the number of times you ask to do that with someone is not a huge amount either. So agents generally are operating, like when I retired, I had 7 confidential human sources that were helping me doing the work of counterintelligence in my area. So, that's not a lot of asking. That's a lot of relationship building, because if you have a good solid relationship with 5 to 7 people, they're going to have their network that they can draw upon to help you as well. So it's about creating deep-seated relationships and trust in order to maximize what it is you're trying to do.
What years were you doing this from until?
Yeah, so came in the FBI in 1997, and I retired in 2018.
Okay, so did you see a change in your approach due to technology then, as technology advanced and the internet became more prolific?
So the approach didn't really. The tools at your disposal to find, to really discover and learn about the priorities of others, because again, that's all you're talking about, is you're learning what's important to them, so you can have a discussion about how you can be a resource for them. It was just the tools to get that information kind of expanded with social media. But again, when you're working in the world of counterintelligence, a lot of most intelligence officers aren't maintaining LinkedIn pages or Facebook pages, and so that becomes a challenge anyway.
So we hear a lot in the news these days about honey traps. How
Yeah.
realistic was the application of honey traps?
Russians would use it a lot against people in their own country. We'd never use them. First of all, it's against the law to entrap, and so we're really regulated by the Constitution in our country about what we can and can't do. So it's, again, and if you're using a technique like that, and it's even suspected that you're doing that, you're not going to get any volunteers. Now that they tried using that, and they have against like our folks overseas, absolutely.
So if one of your folks was overseas, then they would like just send a woman to try and seduce that person. If it was, I'm assuming it was a man. Is that how it would work?
Potentially. Again, it comes down to them identifying the priorities and in that case, the vulnerabilities of the individual that they're targeting. If they assess that individual as being vulnerable to young, pretty females or young males, they'll use that. If they figure out that their vulnerability is gambling, they'll use that. If they figure their vulnerability is drinking, they'll use that. I mean, so they'll identify gaps in your judgment and try to use it against you.
Gotcha. How did 9/11 and the war on terror affect your work?
Yeah, so that was a huge shift for a period of time. So I was working counterintelligence, in the New York City field office in Manhattan, which is about 5 blocks from the World Trade Center. I was on the street getting a cup of coffee that morning when the plane hit the North Tower. Didn't look that big at the time because the facade of the Trade Center is so large. I go up to our floor. I worked on the 25th floor of our building, directly looking at the Trade Center, about 5 blocks away. And so I counted about 8 people jumping from the North Tower before the second tower fireball came through.
Wow.
And so we shifted immediately from working counterintelligence to counterterrorism for a period of time. And it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no days off until I think my first day off was either November or December of that year. As a matter of fact, here's something interesting if you want. We did every kind of thing out there when we're.
Oop, Robin's signal looks like it may have gone.
Here.
There we go. All right, you're back. Yeah. It's all right, you're back. Yeah, keep going.
No, so I actually got a piece of glass from the World Trade Center when we were actually raking for body parts that we're looking for to give back families.
Wow.
I had it right there. Misplaced it. Sorry about that. It's going to show you.
So that brought your focus on that for a period of time. It's perhaps a very important week in geopolitics with what's happened in Afghanistan. Going forward, what would be the focus then? Do you think China?
It's still Russia and China and Iran. Those are still maintaining the 3 postures that are anti-us. The Russians have never, ever shifted their posture against us. During the Cold War and Cold War, they always say we're the number one enemy and threat, and our NATO allies. And so no matter what we do in the world, they will oppose it and they'll counter it and they will undermine it at every opportunity. And China's the same way. China's more, it's a different reason for China to do what they do. But again, it's not in our best interest, the things they're doing. It's in their own.
So what big scores have the Russians had against America in this arena?
So I'd say the number one score they've had in recent years is, and it's something they've always done, and yet the media is now pretending that it's something new, and that's something called active measures. Active measures is when they purposely try to influence the opinions of people through media. Back when when I first started in 1997, they used newspapers like from Brighton Beach called Novoruskoye Slovo. They would use articles, they would use op-eds, they'd use traditional media to influence the opinions of people, in favor of them and against us. And the main thing they're trying to do is sow distrust in our system, distrust in each other, because when we distrust each other, the focus is off of them. And so during our political, the first, time Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton, they got their active measures in line and they sowed distrust. Probably one of the greatest things is that people think they took a side. No, Russians don't take a side with any Americans. They hate us all. Their main goal and objectives was to sow distrust in our electoral system, and they succeeded magnificently.
So, all right. So what are your thoughts on Snowden then?
He broke the law big time. You cannot, if you're in possession of classified material and you wittingly give it to a foreign nexus and a foreign government, then it's espionage. It's a statute. It's not an opinion. It's a statute. If people don't like that statute, then change the statute. But he broke the law. So it is technically espionage.
And do you guys, do the Americans have anyone like big names from Russia that they've managed to get on their side recently?
Boy, if I knew that, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you.
We've just got a couple of minutes left here, Robin. Do you want to just tell the people, what you're doing now and how they can support you and find you?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So if you want any more Robin Dreeke, it's my website is called peopleformula.com, all one word, People Formula. I do a lot of postings and a lot of reading on leadership, communication strategies, and how to engage human beings and create trust, because that's what it's all about. And also, I am also a board member of a group called the Innocent Lives Foundation, and we're a bunch of security professionals that actually uncover people trying to remain anonymous in trafficking children and child pornography. So we actually do that internationally. So if you want to support any of that, go to my website, peopleformula.com. Reach out. I'm easy to get in touch with and easy to maintain contact with.
And when are you going to start a YouTube channel?
I actually have a YouTube channel, and I did another interview today. Matter of fact, I just interviewed yesterday a guy by the name of Jack Barsky. He was a KGB deep undercover agent that was placed in the United States during the 70s and 80s, and he was an East German that was recruited by the KGB. And I interviewed him yesterday. I'll be posting on my YouTube channel probably about a week.
Good. So, sounds like an amazing story. Yeah,
he's fascinating.
We'll get all those links in the description box below the video so that people can support you. Huge thank you for spending time with us this evening, and I wish you all the best.
Hey, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it greatly, and y'all be safe.
All right. Cheers, Robin.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
You too.